Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Tuesday evening. My name is Steven, and I am the host as always. And joining me is my guy, Tyler. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing well. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm ready for a vacation. It was a long year for me professionally, and I'm ready to go sit at the beach and relax. So, as a reminder, if you have not been paying attention, we're going to be taking a bit of a break for the next couple weeks, and we'll be back later in the month for our training camp ramp up period. So, should be fun stuff today. Was the first day of Chargers mandatory mini camp. The Chargers had a bit of a walkthrough in Costa Mesa, and then they went down to Camp Pendleton in Oceanside for a Play 60 event, as well as, I almost said show and tell. That's not the right word.
Meet and greet.
Meet and greet. Thank you. Couldn't think of the word there. Meet and greet with the Marines and everybody. It seemed like there was a ton of fans there as well. Apparently, this was a tradition for like 30 years that the Chargers had done at Camp Pendleton, and then they stopped doing it because of COVID, and this was the first year back, which I think is at least good timing for it to be the first year of the Harbaugh regime to kind of bring back that tradition, and it seems like everybody who went had a good time. Our guy Michael DeFries, I don't know if he's here in the chat right now, but he was telling us in the Discord that coaches, players, everybody kind of stayed around for like an hour, signing autographs today for the fans, signing whatever they wanted, whether it was jerseys, hats, or whatever. So if you attended, hopefully you had a good time and enjoyed the meet and greet with the Chargers players. And, sure seems like a really cool gesture from Harbaugh, in his first year to bring that tradition back.
Yeah, that's great to bring it back. Obviously, COVID postpones a lot of things and pauses things for a bit, but good tradition to bring back. And I'm sure something that he was, a part of and familiar with before as a member of the Chargers. So glad that they brought that back. I'm glad that he's embracing, not that they didn't embrace San Diego, and not that, Camp Pendleton is all the way in like where they played in San Diego, but just remembering to extend your reach and, talk to your fans and be a part of your fans that are a part of that area and a part of, a big part of your tradition and big part of you having been a franchise in San Diego. So glad they did that. Smart of them. And it seems like an awesome event. Seems like, everyone, I've seen pictures all over social media of different fans with every player imaginable that they could have, found. So seems like a really cool event.
Yeah, I think, the team has probably been so focused on growing the fan base in LA, and obviously they've done a ton of work in Orange County area-ish, practicing down there and everything like that. And now they're moving to El Segundo. They've done a lot of work up in that area. But, bringing Harbaugh back, a former Charger, having LT in the front office and in some capacity, having Antonio Gates in the front office in some capacity. I think it's time for them to really start trying to bring that fan base back. And I think some of it has, come back. Like whenever I go to games or training camp, there's always like some people who drive up from San Diego, from Oceanside. So I think it's slowly starting to mend some fences just naturally over time. But I think this regime potentially could be the one to kind of bring a lot of San Diegans back into the fold. And I understand why a lot of people are still bitter, and I'm not here to like talk about the whole like San Diego history and everything like that. But it just feels like this is the right regime to make a lot of those changes. I mean, Eric Weddle was at the event today, and I never would have thought that Eric Weddle would be publicly talking about Chargers events again. So that's kind of where things are at. Hopefully some fences can continue to be mended as they kind of go to, reaching out back to their history and their fan base down in San Diego and continue to bring some people back into the fold.
Yeah, I didn't see. I think Weddle's guys got hosted. I don't know if Weddle actually went. I don't know if I see an official picture of him, but maybe I missed it. But he was at least there for Gates' ceremony last year, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's good to see them mend fences maybe with someone who was maybe not done right, at least in his eyes, and someone who's very outspoken against the Chargers in the past.
Yeah, and I know there was a lot of animosity to Tom Telesco in particular on Eric Weddle's behalf. So, we'll see how that goes. Speculation, obviously. I assume that he was the one who took the picture of his players. Maybe he was not actually there. Maybe somebody else took the picture for him. But hey, man, he talked about it, and he's apparently really close with Denzel Perryman still. So, all right. So the biggest thing from Jim Harbaugh's press conference today, there weren't many other press conferences or things to talk about. They asked him about Justin Herbert all day long, and there was some cool Justin Herbert stuff there, continuing to put to bed the lack of belief that some people think Jim Harbaugh had in Justin Herbert, which I thought was always ridiculous. The main thing is the offensive line. It's the thumbnail of this episode. It's the title of this episode. So we're going to talk about it. And Jim Harbaugh, basically saying that the starting offensive line for the Chargers is set. Obviously, it's Rashan Slater, Zion Johnson, Bradley Bozeman, and Joe Alt. But according to Jim Harbaugh, Trey Pipkins is a part of that starting offensive line at right guard, and that unit he thinks has risen above the rest. They have not practiced in pads just yet. That's all been obviously off-season workouts and practices and things like that. But Jim Harbaugh is obviously comfortable enough to dub this the starting offensive line. Not necessarily a surprise. I kind of thought that this would last into training camp, but Jim Harbaugh thinks he's seen enough, and these are his best five. And we'll kind of see how the rest of the unit shakes out. So, Tyler, your first thoughts here as we kind of, take into account that this is probably the starting offensive line for 2024.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily surprised that Trey, quote unquote, won. Obviously, we still have many months to go, but I am surprised it was sort of decided now. Not that he officially said like this is our starting five week one of the season, but for him to come out and say like this is the five we feel most comfortable with. They've separated themselves. Really, four of them is not a surprise. It's just the spot with Trey and Jamari here. But I guess we should have believed Jim Harbaugh immediately when he said we feel like Trey is one of the five best offensive linemen and basically called him a starter then. Again, I just am surprised it happened now. So I am curious what led to the separation at this point. I don't think it's as simple as, well, Trey's is more expensive, so let's get him out there. Like the Chargers have had no issues sitting players who have made more in the past. And so I just assumed he'd be, maybe an expensive backup, but clearly they feel like he's the starter right now. So I'm curious what it was. Is it just the fact that, because like you said, they have not used pads yet. So there's no real competition. There's no real competing. There's no like, Joey and Thule, they reduced inside and rushed against Trey and they had pads on. I'm like, wow, he held up so well. So to me, it's I'm sure they saw plenty on film where they thought, okay, like this is the best guy moving forward. And B, I'm sure it has something to do with just plain movement skills, which Jamari does not have. Jamari does not have the same kind of movement skills that Trey Pipkins has. Tom Telesco famously said that he had, great left tackle feet or whatever it was. And so I think that there's an aspect of that, maybe we looked at this Chargers offensive line as maybe, and drafting guys or mock drafting guys who are maybe a bit like bigger, but like slower footed, because that's historically maybe more like the Michigan offensive line, the Ravens offensive line. But clearly, I think with at least four of the five guys, I don't know what Bozeman's RAS is, but it's not like, a leader or anything. Yeah.
It's not
but
great.
But with four guys, your RAS is very high. So it's a very athletic group. So him next to Joe Alt, great. So mostly just a surprise it seems to be set now, but not a surprise that he ended up with it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always agreed with the assessment that Trey overall it was and is a better football player right now than Jamari is. To me, it's always just been a question of like the natural fit of the position. I think the decision to go with Trey for me ultimately is a experience thing, a consistency thing, and potentially a leadership thing. I would assume that Rashan is obviously the top dog in that entire offensive line room. But Trey is, the guy who's been with the Chargers the longest. He's been through multiple regimes. He's played multiple positions. He's done a lot, seen a lot. And maybe this is kind of, their way of honoring that. I think maybe this is more about Trey, the person, and Trey, the leader. But I there's no real way to to know that until we kind of get into camp and things like that. But I think this potentially could be more of like a mental and character thing than it could be like on the field fit at the position. This is purely speculation on my part. I mean, Jamari, by all accounts, is also like a great individual, a great leader, and all and everything like that. But maybe this is them just going with a veteran player. On the field, I think the difference, if you really go back and watch the two players from last season, the main thing that I noticed last week when I was studying them is just like consistency of their strike. And Jamari has a more impactful strike. He's more powerful. He has a stronger physical profile. But there were a lot of miss strikes by Jamari's part at, across the board, regardless of who he was playing. I actually, in a weird way, think like his best tape that you can watch is against Chris Jones, which should not be that way at all. But like he'll struggle against like Mike Dana from the Chiefs, but he'll be really good against Chris Jones. Like it's just kind of a weird thing. But Trey, for the most part, like what you're gonna get with him in terms of his strike. If he misses, it's generally more of like an anchor thing for Trey. But his strike timing has improved tremendously, and it's super, super consistent. I think obviously working with Duke and playing next to Rashan and learning from Rashan has really paid dividends there. So this could be their way of saying Trey's a higher floor player right now. He's a veteran player playing next to Joe Alt. He can kind of, mentor him and things like that. So I think those are maybe a few of the initial reasons why you potentially choose Trey right now as opposed to Jamari.
Yeah, I'll certainly take your word for it. I will not go back and watch last season all that much. As far as my next question then just becomes swing tackle, because is that Jamari then? And so I guess two questions. One, has Jamari even been taking any swing tackle reps when they rotate Trey Pipkins in? And then two, is Jamari just the backup interior offensive line guard type? And because you mentioned yesterday on the show that Alex Leatherwood was taking those tackle reps. So if that's Foster Sarell, and if that's Alex Leatherwood, is Jamari not even the swing tackle?
I have seen very few reps of Jamari at right tackle, even before Alex Leatherwood signed. I think this regime views him as a guard who could maybe play tackle in a pinch. And there's a variety of reasons like why right now you would not be playing him at tackle, because I think you need to see what you have in Alex Leatherwood. You need to see what you have in Foster Sarell for a new regime. And that Jamari can play guard. So maybe you don't want to like mess with things too much on the second unit. But when I heard Harbaugh talking about this today, he indicated that basically spots 6 through 8 are up for grabs and they don't necessarily have like a lead candidate there. Maybe that is Jamari. I think that should be Jamari. But he kind of implied that, Jamari, McFadden, Hymas, Sarell, Leatherwood, all these guys are kind of going to be given a clean slate and they'll figure it out in training camp who is going to exactly be put where. And he also did say that like the offensive line can just kind of move around, which I don't agree with that approach, and I don't know if that's going to come true. But Jamari's spot in the pecking order, I think, is firmly in question right now. I have no idea how this team views him. I don't know where he is in the pecking order. I think his spot is in jeopardy. I think that's a fair assessment for him right now.
Man, definitely did not see that coming a year ago when I thought he'd just solidify himself at guard and the rest is kind of history. But yeah, it's a bummer to hear, but we'll see, I guess, in the end. I don't know how they feel about McFadden. I guess we'll see when it comes time to have reps in the preseason, in training camp, who's out there first, who's out there second. But I don't know. Is this spot in jeopardy? So you have your starting 5, Jamari, Brendan, Leatherwood / Sarell. I don't know. I don't know that his spot on the roster would be in jeopardy.
No, not roster spot. I just think like the pecking order. Like I think there is a chance for McFadden or Leatherwood to be that first guy off the bench, and Jamari is not that guy. So I don't
Yeah.
know, man. It's going to require a lot of training camp things, but like in my head entering the season, maybe I didn't always picture Jamari as a clear-cut starter,
Mm-hmm.
but at worst case, he was number 6 for me. Like, unequivocally, I think he is a better football player than who you have behind him. And maybe this is just Jim Harbaugh's way of saying, hey, like everybody else is going to have to earn their spots. And this is a new regime. This is a clean slate. And we'll see how it goes. And maybe I might be reading too much into that. But Jim Harbaugh is very intentional. Like he was not asked specifically about like the starting offensive line. He was just asked like, hey, what are your thoughts? And he was like, these are our starters. So he was very deliberate in like mentioning this specific topic, and him not including Jamari at all, I think was also intentional.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. It's so tough right now. Again, no pads, but yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
What am I going to say? I mean, there's nothing to add at this point. I mean, Jamari spots maybe whatever it is, and Trey's a starter.
Yeah. In terms of like where this offensive line can go, he said that he thinks this offensive line starting unit can be a top tier starting offensive line. What are your thoughts in terms of where they could stack up, floor, ceiling kind of conversation?
I'm not going to do this to myself again where I feel like, oh, look, top 5 offensive line. They're going to be great there. I think they'll settle in as a nice 10 to 15 offensive line. I think that the scheme will do wonders for it. I think they have enough talent for it. But I think Rashan will be Rashan. I think Bozeman will be fine. It kind of depends on Joe Alt and how he, handles himself first year in the league. And I don't think you and I feel like he's going to walk in and just be some, incredible offensive lineman immediately, especially after, against Max Crosby. So I don't know, 10 to 15, above average, a good offensive line with a lot of hope heading into year 2 of the offensive line, and maybe a center that really takes it into like that top 7 or 6 or so.
Yeah, there's a lot of things that have to go right for them. Like you mentioned, Joe Alt has a brutal opening to his career. And it's not easy in practice. I mean, this guy has to go up against Joey, Khalil, Thule, and Bud Dupree in practice every single day. So I think we'll see Joe start to settle in after the bye, back half of the season. He'll start to figure some things out and how to properly adjust there. This is going to be Trey's first time ever in his life playing guard. We still need to see some development from Zion, although I think he's close. And then Bradley Bozeman, I think is a fine, solid starter, but we're going from Corey Linsley to Bradley Bozeman. So it's it's a unit that's going to be carried by the left tackle. It's a unit that's going to be carried by a scheme that's going to be very offensive line friendly. And maybe that leads to some, leads to some overperforming from an individual standpoint. But I do tend to agree, like best case scenario, I still think they're outside the top 10. If you're talking to me about like overall talent and just kind of development.
Yeah. So I'm trying to scroll through Trey's college stats to see if he played any guard, but it sounds like no.
I don't remember that being in his profile. I mean, like
I don't
Sioux Falls, there's no way that they would put a guy like him at guard when they didn't have any other options.
I'm trying. PFF's not loading, so we're gonna assume never mind.
Yeah, it's all good. So I think this is, an overall, like I think it's a good decision for them to make right now. I'm surprised at the timing, but this is going to allow Trey and Joe and Bradley a lot of training camp reps to gain that chemistry, and that chemistry is so important for an offensive line. I don't know how much they're going to play in the preseason, but this is the starting 5, and I think we'll see how it goes. I believe Trey's a good football player. I believe he'll be able to figure it out. I'm just a little skeptical, but I obviously am hoping that it is going to be successful. And I think Trey in a contract season, potentially, basically, I know he has another year basically, but he's essentially a potential cut candidate next year if he doesn't play well. So maybe that provides some motivation. Tyler, any other thoughts there about the offensive line?
Nah.
All right. So 20 minutes in here. The offensive line was the main thing that we wanted to hit on. So we're going to take some questions at this time. If you guys want to go ahead and fire away, we'll be sure to take some questions for about 20 minutes or so today. And then we're cruising out into vacation mode. So let us know what you guys have some pressing questions, and we'll touch on those. Kind of an expansion here on the LL from Mark. Do you think they keep 9 on the 53, or what's kind of your thought process there?
So the 5, let's just say, okay, the 5, Jamari, Brendan, Jordan, and then I don't know, I guess kind of depends if they view Jamari as a swing tackle, but I think they go with 9. I don't see how this regime and Harbaugh would go with 8. Like, to me, it feels like 9 or 10, not 8 or 9.
Yeah, 8 I think is definitely like out of the question, just because you don't give yourself a lot of flexibility if somebody gets hurt, because the league is so desperate for offensive linemen. Like, if you cut a Jordan McFadden, or if you cut Foster Sorrell, even if you cut Alex Leatherwood, like, there's always the chance that those guys get swooped up somewhere else. Whereas if you keep 9, it just gives you that extra flexibility, to have some depth there. So I agree. I think 9 is the minimum. And then if Foster and Leatherwood are just like awesome at camp and you keep both of them, I will not be surprised if that's on the table.
Yeah.
We got a Utah question in here. I'll touch on that in the chat later. I don't want to do that to everybody today. Matthew Hernandez wants to know, does Bozeman have an advantage knowing the offense being with Baltimore?
Probably.
Yeah. His best football was in Baltimore. I think part of that is the coaching and the scheme and things like that. And I'm hoping for a bounce back for him. Brian wants to know if we think that the Chargers keep 3 quarterbacks this season.
This again. It's a definite yes if it's Telesco. Okay, how many did the Ravens keep? So obviously they had Lamar, they had Huntley, probably the last 4 years.
Yeah,
and then
last year they kept 3 because they had Josh Johnson, who they really liked.
Yeah,
I don't believe they ever kept 3 before that.
I just don't see them. I'm sorry, I do not recall the quarterback's name from Augustana. I just don't. I don't.
The 6'8" kid or whatever.
Yeah. Duggan's not on the team.
He is,
or he's on the. No, he finished on the practice squad.
Yes, but then they signed him to a futures contract. So he's basically on an undrafted free agent contract right now.
I'm going to say no, because at some point I have to be right. And I need to get what I want at some point.
Yeah, I think it's just Herbert and Stick. I think they're going to need depth in so many other places where, I just think having that extra roster spot not reserved for a quarterback, like, I think it just gives them more flexibility. Like, they could be keeping 4 tight ends. They could be keeping 10 offensive linemen. They could be keeping 6 defensive tackles. So Max Duggan would have to show some serious strides in order to keep his roster spot. And he's not going to get very many reps. Like, Easton Stick is very clearly quarterback 2.
Yeah.
Like, we do not see Duggan in practice with the second team offense ever.
No, not at all.
Rick wants to know, when do you guys see Slater getting a new contract? And he thinks potentially could be next year.
Yeah.
He is extension eligible to start there.
Right. I don't think it happens before or during the season. So
you think it is next year?
Yeah, I think it's next year. Do you think can he get the money that he probably deserves but can't earn right now because he's not? Right. Like, he's the next guy in line, so in theory you pay him the next amount more, but he's not played to the amount that some of these guys like a Penei Sewell has. So I think you want to play a full year, and like, obviously the Chargers don't have a whole lot of reservations about his play, but it is, the health is part of it. Derwin got extended. Let's see. So I'm trying to think of like previous regimes. So like Melvin Gordon, nope. Melvin Ingram. Did he have a great year and then got his extension? because he was hurt for he was hurt for a
Yes.
number of years.
Yes, it was not
Kind of
until after he
reminds
stayed
me.
healthy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, then Derwin had an injury, got an extension. Yeah, I think it's next year. I don't think it's like during training camp.
If you're the Chargers, I think you want this deal done now, because while we all know how good he is, his value on the market is not beating Penei Sewell's number. Penei got $28 million per year. Obviously that's right tackle, but we're kind of getting away from like the whole left tackle, right tackle in terms of the free agent market. Like it's kind of just becoming who's the next offensive tackle. And so you have Laramie Tunsil at $25 million per year as the highest paid left tackle. You have Penei at $28 million per year as the highest paid right tackle. And Tristan Wirfs is due for an extension. He did not show up at all in the offseason. He was there today as the hold in thing is kind of the new leverage ploy, if you will. He's going to get paid because Wirfs is currently on his 5th-year option. So he's a free agent at the end of the season, and there's no way the Buccaneers let him go. So he's probably pushing to get past Penei's number. And honestly, I think he probably should get past that number. So maybe he's at like 28.5 per year. There's no way that Rashan Slater's on-field performance merits that right now if you're the Chargers.
Right.
So the Chargers are probably going to him with a lower number than he feels like he is worth. And so if you're him, the best way to make sure you get your number is to bet on yourself, stay healthy, have an awesome season, get an All-Pro nomination, go to the Pro Bowl, and then at this time next year, then you're worth $29 million per year, $30 million per year, instead of right now where you're probably pushing like 24 and a half. Like, I don't know if he could beat Larry Tunsil's number right now. I think he comes in under that number right now. So if you're the Chargers, I think you want to get that deal done now. If you're him, I think you probably want to wait.
Right. Yeah, I completely agree. So I think it ends up being next year. I don't think Rashan wants to see that until, because I mean, just so much baked into it. I get that he's great, but the injuries, the not playing, the bicep, so yeah, I don't think anyone's concerned about his long-term future, but I think he wants that pay bump, and he probably wants to see Wirfs get his. So there's another person that he gets to like be ahead of or help his floor out or whatever.
Yeah. Danny Pushpop says thoughts on our starting cornerbacks.
Here's my thoughts on it. So I asked, no, I didn't ask. Mib PJ, the blob man.
Yep.
Yeah, heard me talking about like, okay, how good are defenses when there's a stark contrast in play. There's a big difference, a gap in play between the edge group and the corner group, meaning great edge group, subpar corner group. So he looked at that historically over the last, 15 seasons or so. And the best a defense got in terms of EPA per play was 21st, with that big of a gap between their edge rushers and their secondary and their corners, I should say. The Chargers show up on the list 3 separate times as 28th is the best they got, 24th last year, and then 24th in 2021. So basically what I'm trying to say is it concerns me because we keep, edge rusher is going to help with the interceptions, and it probably will. It should. Like good edge play, good pass rush should help with the secondary, but the floor is so low for this team, this defense right now because of the corner group. So I'm very worried about it because it's not, at minimum, it's not a proven group, and it might not even be a good group.
Yeah. I'm concerned about the play style as well. Just, from what we know about the Michigan defense and the Ravens defense, Christian Fulton and Asante Samuel Jr. doesn't necessarily 100% jive with like who those guys have usually preferred at corner. And obviously they targeted Fulton for a reason. They did not go after a cornerback in the draft early for a reason. So there is some implied trust there. I'm mostly just curious about how long the leash is for those two players and how quickly Cam Hart could potentially earn a starting spot. And it doesn't sound like that's on the table right now. It sounds like Christian Fulton and Asante are 100% the starters right now. But if they get to the bye week and one or both of those guys is just really struggling, does that put Cam Hart into the lineup, or how do they kind of workshop that? It is a real concern for me because at Michigan, Jesse Minter last season and the season before, he didn't have like great edge rusher play, but he had awesome cornerback play, Dax Hill, Mike Sainry still, obviously Will Johnson, who's probably going to be the first quarterback taken in next year's draft. Like, this is a top 10 pick potentially. Was the other guy, the 7th rounder, who you kind of liked? Wallace?
Yeah, Josh Wallace.
Did he get drafted? Anyways, the cornerback talent at Michigan was never in question. I would argue that it was probably their most talented position group at Michigan while Minter was there. So it's just going to be very interesting to see how Minter handles this and how they kind of overcompensate for the lack of cornerback talent. And we haven't even talked about the slot. Like, the slot is a major concern for me.
Yeah, and then by extension, of course, we can talk about the fact that the Chargers are one injury away from it being JT Woods or the resurrected, body of Tony Jefferson out there, or one of these UDFAs who we like, but there's a difference between liking them and then believing that they can full on start as a third safety and now the second safety. So, I mean, yeah, I believe that we're just going to have to deal with it, and the Chargers will have to deal with it this year. I think the good news is I don't think there's a whole lot of expectation for the secondary. Like, we understand that this is not like 2 former first-round picks that are out there or a high-priced free agent like J.C. Jackson or whatever. So I hope to see some development. I don't believe that whatever the starting trio is, I think at least one, if not 2 of them are different, injury or otherwise, by the end of the year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And like you mentioned, I'm going into the season giving this back 7 of the Chargers defense a lot of grace. That includes the linebacker position. I have pretty high expectation for the defensive line overall, and that includes the defensive tackle room. But the back 7 outside of Derwin and Alohi is just kind of like, let's wait and see how this unfolds, and let's wait and see how everything fits together. And I'm not going to have a ton of expectations, for that unit. And if they play great, awesome. If this team can get capable slot play from Jasir Taylor or Tarheeb Still, and they can get one of Fulton or Asante to hit their peaks, then that's a potentially, top 15 to 18 defense. I don't know. That's a lot of question marks. So I'm just going to give them some grace. And if they exceed expectations, awesome. But right now, I have high expectations for the defensive line. I know the pass rush is going to be really good. I have confidence in the run defense. I have a lot of question marks beyond that on defense, and that's okay. Like, this is the first year of a retooling of the roster, and I'm fine with it. I'm giving them grace, and we'll just kind of see how it works out.
I'm curious how the slot competition will go, because we just talked about the offensive line, quote unquote, competition. It's very possible that Trey's just the right guard starter the entire way through training camp. So I'm curious if they've settled on slot corner yet, or if they feel like they want to give that an actual training camp battle. Very different, like offensive line, offensive side of the football versus defense, and Minter and what he wants.
Yeah.
So like Nick and Eddie, they're asking about Tarheeb Still. Yeah, they could be high on him, but right now, like, John Taylor is flat out the starter for them in the slot. So does that change in training camp? Is there going to be a battle, or is it just kind of like he's our guy?
Yeah, and Tarheeb Still is a rookie. He's learning the defense and he's learning everything like on the fly. Maybe that changes in training camp. Maybe they give him more reps, but right now it's exclusively Jasir Taylor. And when it's not Jasir Taylor with the first team defense, it's Derwin. Like, they're not putting anybody else in the slot with the first team defense right now, at least that we know of. Again, media presence has not been super well known, super active. We only can rely on like pictures and videos and things like that. So that is something that could be changed. Obviously, Jasir Taylor has not been known to have great training camps and great preseason games. So we'll see what happens there.
Yeah.
Robert S. asking, what are the chances of the Chargers bringing in a free agent to help boost the secondary? Well, they have Tony Jefferson doing a tryout this week. based off of history, I would think that there's a pretty good chance that that signing gets done. No sources, no info. That's just me guessing. But
Yeah.
I think eventually they do add to the secondary. Maybe not at safety. Maybe it's a veteran slot corner. But I think that they're going to give these young guys a chance for reps. And then if they get to August 15th and they don't love the secondary, I think they'll sign somebody at that point.
Yeah. Yes. The good news is if they don't like it, I do believe this regime will actually go sign someone.
Yes.
But yeah, the Justin Simmons, all this talk, like it has to die. I think they're not just going to suddenly, oh yeah, like Justin Simmons, like, oh yeah, duh, like we should have done that this whole time. They're not just going to magically do that. I think they paid Alohi. We talked very highly about Alohi. He had a great season. Technically, Alohi statistically had a better season than everyone on the open market. So I think Alohi's the unquestioned starter, and it just comes down to who the third guy is going to be. And to them, that could just be Jefferson/Woods and battle it out from there.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. And I also just think that if you're Justin Simmons, like you're probably still asking for pretty good money. You're probably trying to get to a contender. You know, he's got great relationships with Brandon Staley, who's in San Francisco. Like, that's just kind of like a great fit. He's got a great relationship with Vic Fangio, who's in Philadelphia. They both need safety play. So I think Simmons is going to wait for the right opportunity that's going to pay him very well. And I don't know if that's the Chargers. I think they're pretty well set. I mean, Harbaugh flat out said he thinks they have the best safety duo in the league today. Like, they're very high on Alohi Gilman. And I think that it's time for the fan base to catch up with that, as we talked about yesterday.
Are you a little surprised that they've kind of given Jesse Minter this secondary and like, that's your group, man, figure it out?
I am. I understand why they waited on the cornerback front in the draft, but
sure.
If you would have told me back in January that the only free agent addition to the secondary was going to be Christian Fulton, I would have been shocked. Like, I would have definitely expected them to sign a safety and a corner, two corners. You know, I guess it's a belief that they can maximize that position room with Jesse Minter and the scheme and everything like that. But definitely I would have expected a Bud Dupree type at safety or corner over actually Bud Dupree at edge. Like, definitely, like, you know, Bud Dupree as the fourth edge rusher, I did not see coming. I would have expected that kind of profile at a secondary position this year.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about, and I think Ortiz or Harbaugh talked about Dupree as, you know, being part of the rotation, and we've talked about him as being insurance and smart insurance. I just don't see why they couldn't do that for the secondary. Maybe they will. You know, it's June 11th. They have months and months to go to figure it out.
Yeah,
but yeah, I'm genuinely surprised. But I don't know. It would be something if this secondary played better than they did under Brandon Staley with guys that respectfully are in theory not the same caliber as what they had.
Yeah. Yeah. I like this comment from Mighty. We aren't getting Simmons. Joe Ortiz said himself he likes to have some money going into the season for mid-season moves. So for now, we are the budget bolts. I like that.
I do think that if Derwin or Alohi goes down, that they would go sign. They might someone a bit more expensive. Like, I could see them not just doing the next guy up thing.
Oh, I sure hope they wouldn't do the next guy up thing right now. But no, to Mighty's point, like, you know, Bill Barnwell did that article of like the Chargers being most likely to make a midseason trade. And honestly, like, they are the perfect team for it because they have so much cap space next year where you can just really afford to go take a chance at the trade deadline. And it doesn't, like, a lot of teams who make a trade at the deadline, it's for like an expiring free agent because you don't want to mess with next year's cap. Well, if you're the Chargers, you can mess with next year's cap right now. And I think it just gives you, you know, potentially more flexibility down the road. So I think that is a real possibility. I think right now they're probably focused on like developing the youth that they have, and they'll kind of address things later on. And we've mentioned this before, but the Ravens last year signed Kyle Van Noy, and I always forget his name. He played slot for them. What's his name?
I know we just did this too.
anyways, they could sign Van Noy, the slot corner, and Ronald Darby all like 3 weeks into the training camp. So I think there is something to be said to let's get in pads, let's get them, live bullets, let's get them in a scrimmage, let's see kind of what happens, and then if we need to go out and sign somebody, we can do that later on because we do have the cap space and Arthur Mollett, thank you, Damage Inc. Arthur Mollett, that's the slot corner. So I just think that's going to be their approach. They want to see what they have. And, mid-August, they could potentially go sign somebody else.
Yeah.
Non-Chargers related. It was an interesting comment from Jordan Love, and Aiden Murphy brings it up here. Jordan Love expressed a sentiment that not having a true wide receiver one actually makes things more difficult on opposing defenses because they have to prepare for everybody. You don't know who is going to be the heavily targeted player that week. I don't know if you saw that comment or not, but did you feel like you have anything to add there as the Chargers are basically in the same situation as the Packers were last year?
I think it comes from a place of, not privilege is the wrong word, but he has LaFleur calling up plays and a great receivers coach over there. I can't remember his name now, in Green Bay. And it's not like, yes, they don't have a true wide receiver one, but they do have plenty of talent in that wide receiver room. It's not like Christian Watson was like an 8th round pick, and Dubs and Wicks and Reed and these guys weren't drafted, and pretty good prospects. So I think it helps when you have that play caller and when you have a good group of wide receivers. Does it make it less stressful for defenses? I don't know. Or more stressful, I should say. I guess. But then no, because okay, Justin Jefferson's a pain in the ass, by himself or obviously with Addison.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I get what he's coming from, but I think it helps when you have a very good receiver core with a great play caller.
Yeah, I mean, Jordan Love doesn't know anything else in the NFL. Like, he's never had, he got one game to throw to Devontae Adams, and I think they had 18 pass attempts because it was in freezing cold Kansas City in the winter. So I understand why Jordan Love would make this comment, because he probably feels like I can spread the ball around to anybody, and Matt LaFleur probably feels that same way too. I was listening to the Athletic Football Show, and they had Jordan Rodrigue on, and she spent last summer in Green Bay a bit working with Matt LaFleur on kind of an article piece. And Matt LaFleur basically framed the offense as, okay, we have a young quarterback, we have young receivers, they're all just going to figure it out together, and they're going to learn and make mistakes, and everything's just going to kind of fall as it may. You have Justin Herbert, who's very much established. You have Josh Palmer, so it's not necessarily a one-for-one translation. But this idea that the quarterback can just spread the football around and the defense has no idea where the ball is going, it's fine in theory, but every coach is going to tell you they would much rather have a wide receiver one plus extras as opposed to the extras.
Exactly. Right, because this comment is more like, okay, a wide receiver one and nobody else, or a very good wide receiver core. Because you ask him, do you feel the same way if you had the Panthers wide receiver core last year? I'm sure he'd rather have the wide receiver one. Yeah. I don't know if it's going to Mingo or Thielen or this other guy.
That doesn't scare anybody.
No. So I think it has to have, you have to have several good options. So, would I rather have a great wide receiver one and nobody else, or several good wide receiver twos? I think that's a better, maybe more different discussion.
Yeah. I think the comparison is pretty apt because, you have a lot of, high-end number twos in yesterday in the Green Bay room. And I think you have the same kind of conversation here with the Chargers. Definitely better than the wide receiver room that the Panthers had, which is sad that they did that to a rookie quarterback like Bryce Young. But I think overall it's an interesting comment from Jordan Love. We'll see if somebody there can become a number one wide receiver. Obviously they hoped Christian Watson would be that guy, and that didn't come to fruition. They also have two really great young tight ends that helps make things easier as well.
Yes. And they've had Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
So They're certainly not without over there.
Yeah. Mighty also bringing up a good point here about the Chargers cap space. Joe Alt just barely signed, and Land McConkey has not signed his contract yet. So the cap space is a little bit misleading because of that. And then, I think that's kind of like the last little bit here. So really the Chargers have like $25 million in cap space, and then we'll kind of see what the number is once those contracts are put into over the cap.
Was that 26 million with the alt contract?
I think it was without.
And then they haven't said McConkey, which isn't going to like crater their cap space, but
26 million without Joe Alt.
Who got a heck of a signing bonus.
Yeah, man, $20 million signing bonus. That's pretty crazy.
Fifth overall pick.
Yeah, so Joe Alt and Land McConkey, their contracts are right now just listed as like undrafted free agent contracts on over the cap. They're not even in the top 51. So that will change. So the 26 million does not include their top 2 picks. So that probably is even closer to like 20 million. And then the aforementioned in-season budget,
which I think they will use. I don't know, man. I would love for the Chargers to be. What am I saying? Of course, we all would. I would love for the Chargers to actually be in a decent spot to make a trade.
Yeah,
and like push in a little bit more. We talked about several trade candidates. Go watch that video.
Yeah. Definitely go watch that video. It honestly just makes too much sense for where they're at. If one of these guys that comes available is under contract still, it just like the Chargers are going to have so much cap space next year where like the whole compensatory pick thing, I don't know how much that actually happens next year. Like if Joshua Palmer has an awesome year and then they let him walk in free agency, they're going to have too much cap space to get a compensatory pick for him. So you might as well go use some of next year's cap space at the trade deadline this year. And, free up some compensatory pick moves.
Yeah. I don't see another bunch of questions. Ask some questions.
Yeah. Athir in the chat says that his bold prediction from yesterday, he wasn't here yesterday, but his bold prediction is that Gus Edwards will be a top 4 running back in yards and touchdowns this season.
Okay, so top 4 in yards. What was top 5 last year? Like what is the NFL like these days? Rushing yards. I'm guessing it was McCaffrey.
Yes.
Madden cover McCaffrey, I should specify.
Shout out.
Okay, so
are you pulling it up on PFF?
I'm honestly just on ESPN, but McCaffrey, so big lead at 1459 yards. But then Derrick Henry 1167, Kyron Williams 1144. So if you had 1200 last year, you were in second place. And Edwards had 800?
Yeah.
Top 4. So he's got to get to 1200.
Touchdowns I can see. Yards I think is a bit difficult for me. I just don't think he's going to have the volume to get there. Touchdowns I can see because I think like red zone work is going to be his thing. All right, now we got some questions rolling in. We appreciate you guys. Thomas Martinez, pick one Lord of the Rings character to fight for you in Trial by Combat.
I'll go Legolas. I think that you can keep the distance against any bigger foe.
Yeah.
So I'll go Legolas. Unless we can go like video game Galadriel or something, and like where she goes all like, witch. Give me Legolas. That takes care of any like ring wraiths because he, technically not a man, so you can kill them.
Yeah.
Or like maybe Glorfindel, I guess, if you want to go that far. But yeah, give me Legolas.
My first thought was Gandalf because then I get all the magic stuff.
Yeah, he's already died.
Well, if we're going with characters who are currently alive, then like, yeah, I'll take Legolas and
So you go Gandalf the
Aragorn.
White, I'm
Yeah,
guessing. Okay.
I mean, he
Yeah.
lost to the fire demon, like, and then he beat him. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Or just any dead soldier from the army of the dead, because no one can kill them except for Aragorn. So
yeah. Aragorn's obviously a good one too.
if I had to pick a cast member, I'd pick Viggo Mortensen for sure. Who like actually was basically.
Have you ever seen the thing about how little Orlando Bloom actually got paid for Lord of the Rings?
Oh yeah.
I saw that video, like,
175K.
yeah. I mean, like, that's a lot of money for me, but for that role, like, I was shocked. I had not realized that Lord of the Rings was like his launching pad point.
Yeah. And then Pirates, like what a heck of a what a 1-2, man.
And then he married Katy Perry. What a life! What a life!
That's not bad.
Colin McGuire says that he loves what we are doing with creating depth on the edge, but I still don't feel confident in our run stoppability. Thoughts? I assume this is a doubt about the actual defensive tackle room and not the edge rusher room in terms of run stopping ability, because the edge rushers that they have, all four of them are awesome run defenders.
Yeah.
But I can understand why you'd be a little bit skeptical about the defensive tackle room.
Yeah, I definitely have my reservations. Zont's a starter, not a great tackler. Shaw, I guess, will be the starter. I think is a better tackler, but was hit or miss last year. Durbin, I don't feel too concerned about. Linebackers, completely new, and that hasn't been a huge strength for the Chargers lately, but I think they'll be okay. And then defensive tackle, we're putting a lot of faith in Poona Ford to make that work, and I don't know how good he's going to be.
Yeah, I understand the reservations. I'm probably more optimistic about Poona than most people.
Mm-hmm.
Weirdly, Scott Matlock was the second defensive tackle that Jim Harbaugh mentioned today when asked about the defensive tackle room, which I thought was strange because Scott Matlock's tape from last year was pretty bad. It was rough.
Great.
Yeah, he eventually got to Morgan Fox and Otito Ogbonnia as well, but I think the defensive tackle room will exceed expectations overall, but yeah, I understand why there would be some reservations for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Matlock. Speaking of Matlock, what Michigan player does Harbaugh get next year? I hope it's Colson Loveland, man. He's already my favorite player in next year's draft, and we're not even studying yet. So I love Colson Loveland.
Yeah, I think it'll fit like right about where they're drafting, and unless he gets some gaudy, like incredible final season, which maybe he could. But yeah, I think him. But they need a corner.
Yeah, if they're high enough to get Will Johnson, that's gonna be a pretty big disappointment of the season. Yeah, because I mean, elite cornerbacks like him usually tend to go like top 8-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, Derek Stingley like barely played his last season at LSU, and he still went top 8. So we'll see what happens there. I got a super sticker from Miss Andrea Schoon. Shout out, Mama Schoon. Glenn Gordo, over under Herbert plays 4 quarters in the preseason. I'm going to say under there.
I'll say under. Yeah, I'll say under. I think he plays 2.5. No, get 3.75. So I'll take the under.
I think he plays like, somebody else was asking about like playing starters in the preseason too. Where was that? Oh, Dennis Yum also brought it up. I think it's going to be kind of more what like Anthony Lynn did, where like the starters play 1 quarter in the first game, a half in the second game, and then they don't play anything in the third game. Like your third game is your, chance to evaluate the rest of the roster. So I think the starters play kind of like 3 quarters ish.
Yeah, I mean that'd be more fun than the previous years where we were just like Easton Stick for a half and then Duggan for well, not even sometimes the entire game, but yeah.
The last game I think was Duggan for 3 quarters. So that was fun. Oh,
Yeah,
man. Or the Chase Daniel Easton Stick like rotation year that they did where they were alternating series. I was like, what are we doing here?
that's right. I know. I just want to go back to like Cardale Jones, Easton Stick, Geno Smith.
Isn't it hilarious to look at Geno Smith now and like
Oh
he was
yeah,
the backup for the Chargers for a year, just like randomly,
yeah,
and he was like
yeah.
the coin toss guy.
And he learned a lot.
Yeah, I like to think of Geno being like this era's Phillip Rivers from a stylistical standpoint, because that guy does not care about hospital balls at all. He will throw so many lasers over the middle.
I don't know. I don't watch any Seahawks football.
Geno's fine.
I believe you.
Barry wants to know which will be ranked higher this year, passing game or running game.
Ooh, passing game. I'll say passing game because you have Herbert.
Yeah.
They're built to run it. Like that is the core, but I think the passing game.
Yeah, I would agree. Glenn Gordo wants to know what rookie jersey are you most likely to buy this season?
I bought Joe Alt's, so I guess that one. But I might not keep it because it's not supposed to be here until like October. I don't know if I want to wait that long, so I might just return like or refund the order or whatever.
That's weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Whatever. Willis Patrick, if he makes it.
The 10th offensive lineman.
Look, man. Whatever. Yeah, replace Keenan Allen and Justin Herbert jerseys behind me with Willis Patrick and like Jalen Phillips.
Jalen Phillips makes it. I feel like you should get a jersey.
I think so.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Jerseys are weird for me.
I like it quite a bit.
Yeah, I used to be super into jerseys, but now I'm like, from a fan perspective, I think the old jerseys were way better than the new jerseys. I don't love the new jerseys as a fan. I'm like wearing them. That's just me. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree. I like watching the really like ripped athletic guys wear the new jerseys, but on me it just looks stupid. So, like, I'm not gonna wear them.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing about wearing a jersey to a game at SoFi is if you're not in the shade, you are cooking. And I would much rather just wear a t-shirt.
Yeah, I haven't worn a jersey to a game since San Diego, probably.
Yeah. My biggest piece of advice to anybody going to SoFi Stadium is sit on the side of where the team store is, because that's the shaded side. And you'll be much more comfortable. We sat on the opposite side for a couple games, and even in like December, you're just like, you're cooking in the sun. Like it is so much hotter on that other side.
Yeah. So if anyone's wondering, like, I'm in 231. That's right by the team store, and it's great. I love that area. That side is awesome. I know you sat during the Browns shootout game in the sun, and I'm sure you were sweating that already. And then rough.
Yeah, it's much more comfortable on the other side. So it's like sections like 226 to I think like 236 basically, and then like up and down, obviously, like that kind of sections. That's where you want to sit at SoFi, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yep.
The sideline of the Charger side is also good, because later in the evening the sun kind of starts to push towards the other side. But yeah, if you can sit in the end zone where Tyler sits, that's the best place to sit.
Yeah.
All right. Do you see any other questions you want to hit on?
I think that's okay, fine. Only because this has been brought up so many times. What do we think of the Tremont Morris Brash signing? Aiden asks. That's an undrafted free agent for everyone who's asking. It was like announced on Twitter by people as like, oh, they signed this guy to a 3-year deal. He's an undrafted free agent, and I like him. We've talked about him, but he's an undrafted free agent. This isn't like a veteran that they've signed.
Yeah, no, I don't know why it was announced the way that it was announced, but he signed his undrafted free agent contract weeks ago, just like everybody else did. So I don't know.
I'm
It's
happy
fine.
for him.
Yeah, congrats. Make that money.
Yeah.
The Chargers were not super active in the undrafted free agent market this year. They did not hand out like any big undrafted free agent signing bonuses or anything. So I'm curious if that trend continues next year.
Yeah, it's strange because I actually like this class the most than I've watched recently, and yet it feels like it's like nobody else does. Like they were 31st on Thor Nystrom's rankings or whatever.
Yeah. I think people liked the safeties.
Yeah.
And that was like it. Some people like Carson Barnhart. I do not share that opinion, but some people liked him.
Some people like him because he played at Michigan.
Yeah.
No shot. I don't think anyone's actually watched Carson Barnhart because I will point you to a game that will change your opinion.
Yeah.
He played tackle. But
watch the first 2 series of the Penn State game and you'll be like, you'll have a very different opinion. Which is funny because everybody and their dog has shared those clips of Chop Robinson. And then they're like, yeah, that offensive tackle who's getting cooked by Chop Robinson. I like him.
I get it. Chop Robinson, pretty good. But yeah, that was a rough first impression. That was a rough one, and he didn't really shake it from there.
Yeah, it is what it is. All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. I appreciate all of you for tuning in. Appreciate the questions. Thanks so much for the positive feedback over the last few weeks. It's time for me and Tyler to unplug and take a vacation. Tyler might be back for a little individual video later on in the week, depending on what happens the rest of the week at practice, but we'll see how it goes. So we'll be back in a few weeks from now. We'll talk about everything, training camp ramp up related. Should be a fun time. We always have a good conversations about, sorting tiers of players and ranking who's most important, things like that. Some interviews, everything like that. Should be a lot of fun. All right, Tyler, appreciate you as well. It's been a fun summer so far, and should be a fun one down the road. All right, guys, this has been another episode of the Guilty as Charged podcast. We appreciate you as always. Bolt up.